Hi, I am Pixel Pia, and this is Creator in the Loop. This week I want to share something with you that I have noticed for a long time while using AI. Sometimes AI explains something so clearly and structured that I feel like I understand it even before I really do. And the moment you try to explain that thing back to yourself, the gaps become visible. So in this video, I want to test something. Not if AI's answers are good, but if the clarity itself become misleading. So this time, instead of just accepting the explanation and move on, I decided to stay with it a little longer, to question it, to push on it, to try to work with it instead of just consuming it. So let me show you what happened. I chose a topic here that I have a slight understanding of, but not enough to create an explanation myself. And the question I gave to AI was, explain how neural networks learn in simple terms. Write your answers in Canvas. And the reason I chose to write it in Canvas here when I'm working in ChatGPT is that I wanted to be able to interact. Here is the first answer. A neural network is a computer system designed to learn patterns from examples. You can think of it a bit like a student learning from mistakes. Step 1, the network makes a guess. Step 2, it checks if the guess was wrong and measures the size of its mistakes, which are often called error or loss. It adjusts itself. It repeats this a million of times. Looks very clear. Okay, it makes a guess, it checks the answer, it adjusts, and it does this over and over again. But that isn't really the explanation of how a neural network learns. So, since I am in Canvas, for example, this part here, it checks if the guess was wrong. I wanted to follow up, so I asked, where does it check its answer? Who has the answer key? And what do you mean by measuring the size of mistakes? And about the answer, the human have submitted the answer, and there are probabilities assigned to the guesses, which is the error percentage that it corrects afterward. And I continued to ask who sets those weights of the answers. And I also asked, how do we know that the system's interpretation of how much to adjust the errors are correct? And we fully don't know in advance that every adjustment is correct. Instead, the system uses mathematics to estimate, and so forth. I kept on asking questions. And what's interesting about this part is that by asking questions about its original answer, the explanations changed. While the first answer I got felt like it's almost finished, this is complete. When I started to ask these questions, I realized that I didn't understand it really. And I really started feeling that the original answers, which I would have accepted, was not very accurate. It wasn't wrong, but it was missing some important parts of it. And it actually made me feel like I understood how a neural network learns when I did not. So, after going through these questions and digging deeper to try and understand, I wanted to see if I now understood it. Okay, let's see if I can get this correct now. A neural network is a computer system that gets fed a lot of data of a specific kind, for example, photos of faces or spoken language. It is then tasked with learning to identify something specific in that data, like identify gender or nationality by trying. It then gets the correct answers, and by comparing its answers, it changes the values of the errors and try again. And this time the answer said you are very close. The main thing to correct is this part. It changes the values of the errors. The network does not directly change the errors themselves. It changes the weight inside the network in response to the errors. A clearer version would be, and look at this, compared to the very first answer. This is really short, but it is much more accurate from what I understand. A neural network is a computer system that is fed a large amount of data, such as photos, speech, or text. It is given a task like recognizing faces or understanding language. At first, it mostly guesses randomly. The system then compares its guesses to the correct answer and measures how wrong they were. Using that feedback, it adjusts its internal weights slightly and tries again. Over many repetitions, the network becomes better at detecting patterns in data. The learning loop you described is basically correct. Input data, prediction compared to correct answer, measure errors, adjust weight, and repeat many times. And by asking the questions I did to the first answers, I got a real understanding how a neural network learns. And talking about question, I wanted to do a second test. A test where instead of me asking AI questions, I have AI ask me questions. This one, I chose a topic that I'm interested in, but you can use this method with any topic. So my initial prompt was, don't answer this. Ask me questions that help me think it through myself, one at a time. I will answer them, but not in this conversation. I will tell you when I am ready for the next question. How do I use AI without becoming mentally passive? The reason I chose not to answer these questions in this conversation was that I don't want my answers to influence your answers. But we are going to look at the questions. The first question I got from AI was, when you notice AI making something feel clear, what signs help you tell the difference between understanding something and merely recognizing an explanation that sounds convincing? To be honest, I really had to stop and think. What signs tells me that maybe I shouldn't just accept this answer as understanding. Maybe I need to dig deeper. If you try this yourself, you might get surprised. The next question I got was, what kinds of thinking do you most want to protect from outsourcing to AI? For example, struggling through confusion, forming your own opinions, remembering information, making connections, generating ideas, or something else. This I didn't have to struggle with as much. For example, of course, I want to form my own opinions. I don't want AI to form them for me. While I think generating ideas can be an excellent way of interacting with AI. The next question, at what point in your own thinking process does AI become most helpful to you? Before you form ideas? While you're exploring them? Or after you already have a rough understanding? And why might that timing matters? Next question. If AI suddenly became unavailable for a week, which part of your current thinking or learning process would feel weakened, interrupted, or difficult to continue on your own? This was one of the most interesting questions I got from AI this time. If I couldn't use AI, if it stopped to exist, where would I really miss it the most? And it might surprise you if you try to answer this yourself that it's not a given where you actually would miss it. Next question. What kinds of mental effort feels frustrating in the moment but later turn out to have been important for your understanding and growth? When I saw this question, I first thought to myself, what has that to do with AI? But then I paused and I started thinking back to the time before we used AI. When I was going to college and we didn't have AI, what type of learning or thinking felt most frustrating while I was up in it and gave me the most valuable results when I struggled through it? And that told me something about what things I should stay away from using AI for. And the last question here is, when you use AI and feel your thinking getting lighter or easier, what specific signals would tell you that you crossed from supported thinking into not really thinking anymore? I could keep on going here by asking for more questions. I could use the same method for a totally different area than thinking, but to use AI to ask you question is a really good way of interacting and keeping your thinking. What surprised me about these experiments was that how very small changes in how I interact with AI gave such a large change in how mentally active I stayed. The smoothest interaction often led to the strongest feeling of understanding. But feeling like you understand something isn't the same as really understanding it. Not understanding deeply enough to explain it, question it, or work with it yourself. And I think AI can blur that distinction really quickly. The moments that helped me the most was the ones where the interaction slowed down. For example, when I asked AI to question me, the moments where I had more struggle, where I questioned things, where I was uncertain, where I realized I didn't fully understand something. And honestly, I think that effort matters because I don't think the goal is to remove all friction. Maybe friction is where the real understanding begins. And I think this goes beyond just explanations. Because the more I work with AI, the more I see this pattern appear in creative work too, in writing, in ideas, in my personal voice. So in my next video, I will test something different. What happens when I ask AI to rewrite something that I have written? I am Pixel Pia, and this is Creator in the Loop. I hope to see you back here for my next video. Until then, bye.